Good morning, this is DebraVWilson. I am in England. It is the 30th of June, 2019. It's Sunday, and the time is 1100 hours and 25 minutes, and that's GMT. So I was sitting here doing some research, and I say with a smile, and I was thinking about some of the research I'd just done in London. And the thing that I always think when I'm in London doing research is I need to go back and I need to do more, which I will do. There are two events coming up this week that I'm quite interested in attending. London Pride. It's been decades since I've been to Pride in London, and I'd like to see face-to-face what it looks like in 2019, what's changed, what has not changed. I'd also like to go to the PAL Expo, so I'm very keen to do that. Personal interest and also as a part of my research. If you know anything about London from a civil society perspective, is civil society here in London and in Great Britain and north of Ireland does what every emergence from human beings. It performs the same way that all emergences from human beings, whether it's the top down or the bottom up. It punches above its weight. So to give you an example, FCO in this small island nation, Foreign Commonwealth Office is, you can find information on the world by going to their website and looking up a country. And the activists here in all of their shapes, sizes, and political ideologies punch above their weight. I've been coming to the UK now for over a span of 30 years, and it's always been this way. So that brings me to the point of this video. London is the place where you can fill in the blanks. It's the place that I came when I was in my late 20s, and I traveled here, I think I could say 2 times in which I was a tourist, and then after that I started doing volunteer work. My volunteer work was always around feminism. I found my volunteer jobs by going to the Silver Moon bookstore, which was a women's bookstore. It is now closed and has been so for several years. I will include the link with some information about the bookstore. In the basement, the lower level 0, I always get confused still after all these years of the way in which British people track and account for living spaces. In the US, you'd say the basement. Here, level 0 or lower level, I think. Well, in any case, they had books on the lower level, and they also had signs and postage telling you about jobs available. And there were jobs in women's organizations, and the women's organizations were tiny and most times self-funded or funded with very small government or local borough grants. So they were always in need of help. It was never glamorous, and sometimes it was simply updating their filing system, keeping the spaces clean, advertising what they did for women and in the larger community. So I started doing volunteer work by simply taking the ads, grabbing an ad, and calling someone. It's before mobile phones, so you actually either had to go to their office, which sometimes they didn't even have an office, they met places, or you could call them. So whilst living in America and making frequent trips to London, England, that was 3 to 4 times a year, I started a volunteer career. And the thing about working in a country that is not your place of birth and not your place of full-time residence is I got to learn the city. I got to learn the country. And the way I understood London and the larger country was through the prism of service via activism. Britain was and still is a place, and I'm going to say this with explanation. I acknowledge that this country, like every country on this planet, has a hierarchy, and within that hierarchy there are barriers or challenges for people who are not at the top of the hierarchy. I will always acknowledge that. I will also acknowledge that there was great access for me as a black woman. And one of the things that happened here, because I was in the Capitol, there was always in the tiniest organizations at least one woman, and the groups that I belonged to back in the day, they were all women. There was always at least one woman who was involved with the government, and by that I mean her MP, her counselor. So there was always, or the House of Lords. I'm sorry that I made that mistake. And so there was always the opportunity to have a member of parliament or someone involved in government come and speak and encourage us to come into parliament as private citizens, or as from my case, a guest of the country. So I went to meetings, and a myriad of meetings about feminism and anything and everything about countries I had never visited, that I have only recently visited, or I have yet to visit. The world opened up, and that was through civil society. So then I'm naming this podcast London is Where You Can. And I think that is still the case. I am always amazed that this small, tiny nation and the good stuff it has done, and the access that it has given, and the place of learning that it is, even in a civil society role in a tiny organization that often they propped up to respond to a need in the community. Again, I view organically emerging civil society as a immunological-like response to the needs of society, or the understanding of society and the response to it, or the understanding of the behavior of the state or response to it. So sometimes these organizations only popped up for a specific reason or cause or an event, and then they disbanded. But it was a way not only to connect to London and other feminists, but a way to connect to the country. It was a way for me as a foreign national to understand the heartbeat and the way the country thinks and feels and operates and engages. It was a way in which I understood how some civilians experienced their lives living in this island nation, and how they experienced the behavior of the government. That was fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating. I'm going to try to find some websites that give you a smattering of civil society here, but you're going to have to do some work with this one. But I will endeavor to point you in the right direction. Civil society in this country, I will look at the capital city, London. That's the scope of this YouTube podcast. And I think of Cressida Dick, so I will now definitely have to find that video where she talks about activism and the performance of activism in the Capitol. It is always on. The citizens here are always giving voice, whether it's in spontaneous activism, whether it's in organized activism, or whether you're going through Leeds Market and people are giving voice, customers and vendors, about the experience of living in this country. I know Leeds Market is out of my scope, the scope of this YouTube video, but I had to say it. It's a country that always looks outward. She has always looked outward. It's a country in which you will meet in some, well, now here I come from the U.S. Sometimes you meet in the smallest of places in rooms that weren't properly air conditioned, or the heating wasn't what I would expect as an American in the middle of winter. But you soon forget about your slight personal discomfort when you, in that small little room, start talking about the world, start talking about the well-being and your concern about the well-being of your fellow citizens in this country. London is the place where you can go to a myriad of museums, art galleries, libraries, free of charge. Sit, listen, learn, engage. I never tire of going through Parliament, Westminster. I never do. I never do. Decades and decades ago, I responded to something, a leaflet I saw from Diane Abbott's office, MP Diane Abbott's, black businesswomen. I will post that as well. That was decades ago. I never met her, but that was the impetus for me going in and out of Parliament. I didn't even know that was something private citizens could do, particularly foreign nationals. You have to go through security. The security has always been tight, and within that tightness has ebbed and flowed based on current events. And that will be the case for the foreseeable future, one imagines. But don't let that stop you. Don't let the security stop you. Don't let the long queues stop you. It's the place to engage. It's the place to learn. It's the place to be a part of. It's a place in which this country has struggled with. How much access do they continue to give to the general public? And weighing that with the security of the place and the people who work there. It's not been an easy one for them. I'm a person who has always reveled in that access. The UK, Great Britain, and north of Ireland has been a place, Westminster, that no matter what, her doors were always open. Opportunities to serve this country in terms of doing volunteer work as a foreign national, I've often become aware of in Parliament. The much maligned House of Lords has within that institution a wealth of knowledge from learned people who, some of those learned people, I can say from personal experience, their very heartbeat, the ethos of their existence is to serve. I've met numerous MPs. I've attended many events, some open to the public, some that I've had the wonderful honor of being invited to that were not open to the general public. London is a place where you can. So, it's one of the places that I will be visiting to do my research. It's one of the places in which I came to visit. Okay, here I go. I'm serious. I'm thinking in my studies, whilst I'm studying, I'm going to call myself the mature research student who cries. I always cry about everything. It is the place where when I thought I couldn't come back here, I went to. It is the place that when I did come back here in 2011, that a government agency, a young lady from a government agency met me. It's 2011, and it took me some time to integrate that experience, but so I did. London is the place that I've had some very unique life experiences from government employees of nations not American and not British. I think that suffices. That's sufficient. I don't think I need to say anymore. London is the place that attracts the world. Some foreign government employees, yeah, and other people, like tourists, regular old tourists, students, people on their honeymoon, people on business trips. London is a place where you can. It's the place where you bump into people and you hear an accent that might be from around the world, or it might be a British accent you're just not familiar with. London is a place where you can. So I'm going to post this podcast oh yeah, London is a place where you can actually hear someone say for the United Kingdom government, Great Britain and North of Ireland, I'd like to be inclusive, government, a white man say to a black woman from a government agency, you need to learn to speak up. You're very clever indeed. London is the place where you can. It's a relatively small country with huge shoulders that punches way above her weight, from top down to bottom up. London is a place where you can. This is DebraVWilson. I'm traveling again this week and doing more. That'll be for the foreseeable future. Future is, I think, a small future, because I'm hoping, but anyway, more on that later. But I'm doing some field work, and that's the way the field work, this is still self-funded at this point, but that's the way my field work looks now. It will look different in the very foreseeable future. So I say, thank you very much.